Assalamualaikum everyone, my name is Shoaib. I'm a first year medical student. Today we're going to be talking about common mistakes I see people making with Anki, both as my peers in med school, but also some mistakes that I've seen my students, my MCAT students make as well. So inshallah this would be beneficial to uh, both groups of people. So the first issue I've seen, and this is mostly with people who just try and jump into things and figure them out by themselves, but uh, people don't have a workflow or strategy for how they're going to tackle these pre-made decks. So to illustrate this point, I've downloaded the MileDown MCAT deck, and so when you download it, it'll look sort of like this. And so what I've seen students do is they download fresh install of MileDown deck, and then they say, today I'm going to study biochemistry or biology, and I'm going to click study now. And then they get fed 20 random cards from the entirety of what's fair game on MCAT biology, which is not really organized and honestly is a good way to like start losing your mind. So what I recommend, a strategy I recommend is you hit B for browse. And I go into this in much more detail in my other video, but just to go through it quickly, I recommend selecting the deck, hitting Control A, and then suspending all the cards. So you turn all of the cards off, and what that does is, bam, now you have no cards available to study. And then you say, today I'm going to learn, I don't know, memory. Today we're going to study memory. And so what I do is I go to the tag for memory, I select all of the 43 cards, and then I unsuspend them, and then bam, now I'm only going to be studying the memory cards. Well, right now it's only feeding me 20, but that's why you would go in and do more new cards per day, and then max out your reviews as well. That's very succinct. That's a sample workflow. You're going to need to figure out what works for you, but you really want a strategy when you're going into these decks. The second point I wanted to make is don't unsuspend and spend time cards doing well. Like things that you know in and out cold, you're never going to forget. So if you have a card that says blank is the powerhouse of the cell, it's not really going to benefit you much to have that in your Anki card rotation. The other reason why I want you to start doing this is because I want you to have intentionality about what you're studying. From now on, you are going to be a self-directed learner. So it's really important to think and self-reflect and have this habit, thinking about what you're learning, why you're spending time learning it, and how well you'll know it. So when you go through cards you're about to unsuspend and ask yourself these questions, you're starting to build the habit of intentionality. The second common mistake I see people make is they use Anki to hammer in a screw, so to speak. Anki is a very specific tool with good features that work to its advantage. So the main draw of Anki is the scheduling system. So it schedules cards either closer or farther out based on how well you know those cards. And because of this feature, Anki is designed to be a long-term review tool. So we're going to actually break this down. So long-term versus short-term. So when you're using Anki, you're going to want to have a destination farther in the future than, for example, 1 to 2 days out. So I've seen people like start spamming Anki decks the night before the exam. And honestly, this is not going to be very conducive to learning for many reasons. But the first of which is that Anki was not designed for this. It's designed for long term. The second part is that it is a review tool. So reviewing comes after learning. So when you're sitting spamming spacebar the night before an exam, you are just going to be seeing gray text on a white text on a gray background, and that is not really conducive to like memory. Anki works best as a review tool. So then people ask me, Shoaib, like, how do I learn then? Like, people keep telling me to use Anki, to which I say, like, guys, you already know how to study, but just make sure you're actively learning. Like, I can't teach you how to study. figure out what works best. Studies have shown that people learn best when they see things in different forms, when they see things, hear things, write things down. I don't care how you do it. Learn the stuff and then come back and review with Anki. Uh, so the other issue with using Anki as a learning tool is that oftentimes, especially when you don't already know the content and you're not already familiar with it, your brain looks for shortcuts. So you tend to remember the card versus remember the fact. So I've actually pulled up a med school flashcard here to illustrate this fact. So, like, if you don't know what this is talking about, like, pretty much every word in the sentence, like, does not make sense to you, right? And so you can do these cards, right? You can unsuspend, like, neuro cards and then memorize that the number 4 is what goes here. But you won't actually be learning the information. You'll just be memorizing the card itself, which is not what you're trying to do, right? You're trying to be able to recall the information on the exam when you take it. And so, especially when you don't already know the information and you're just looking at a singular factoid, but all of the you don't have all of the sort of background that goes around it, you're not going to be doing so hot. It's going to be very, very frustrating. So I recommend you think of Anki as a long-term review tool. And so one of my students put it best. He said that like you shouldn't use Anki like Quizlet, and this is because Quizlet is designed to be a short-term learning tool as opposed to Anki, which is a long-term review tool. So I will say that there is an exception to this rule, and that is Anki at its base is a flashcard software, and flashcards are really good for recalling simple terms and definitions. So when you have a simple definition that's given to you, thin flap of skin, stretch type, yada yada yada, tympanic membrane is the answer. You don't really need like a corpus of information, a background. You don't need like a general understanding of any sort of thing to learn this information. With the exception of the psych-social section, this is not the majority of what is on the MCAT, and especially is not going to be what you're going to be doing in med school for the most part. So you can like spam Anki to learn this stuff, but for the most part, like you're going to need to do some learning on your own and then come to Anki to sort of drill it in. I think that's enough for that. So the next common mistake is kind of an easy one, and that's consistency. Remember, Anki is a long-term review tool. You need to do all of your dues every day. All of your reviews, all of the green cards that show up here, you need to do every day. And this is so that the algorithm can continue to feed the correct cards. If you're finding yourself overwhelmed, you need to reduce the number of new cards you're doing in a day. And you want to do news after reviews, just because you really need to do all of your reviews every day. Okay, the next mistake I see people make with Anki is that they passively learn rather than actively learn. So when you pull up a card, you have to quiz yourself. So you need to read the question, and then you need to think of what the answer is, and then you need to click space. It is not okay to read the question, click space, and then be like, oh yeah, I know that. If you do that, you're going to be hitting again because you don't actually know it. So I had this issue a lot, so I downloaded this extension called No Space Dash. There's a fixed version and not fixed version. Download the fixed version because the not fixed version doesn't work. The other issue I see people do is they click easy and hard, even though it's not easy or hard. Like for example, people will hit hard even though they actually don't know it. So the problem with abusing easy and hard is that they will ruin your algorithm. Please don't mess up your algorithm because remember, like that's what Anki has going for it. The next issue I see people do is they make their own cards, and we're actually going to get into this more. So the big thing with self-directed learning is you need to be asking yourself constantly, like, what am I doing? Is what I'm doing working? And if it's not working, you need to be flexible and shift gears. So oftentimes people find themselves in a rut. They'll keep getting the same cards over and over again, day after day. They'll keep forgetting. They'll remember it maybe one day, and then those cards will keep coming back. They'll keep coming back. They'll kind of leech on your time. So clearly when this happens, and this will happen to you, something is not working. Your time is precious. Don't waste it. Think about, hey, like this isn't working. how am I going to fix this? So I'm going to give you an example. I had a really hard time with biochem cards in this deck, specifically for pathways. So for some of these pathways, uh, like these cards were not sticking uh, at all. Like I was just not getting it, and I found myself like probably I wasted like a lot of time just like cycling through these cards, hitting it again and again and again. What I ended up doing is I just started drawing out the pathways, and I found that that was a much better use of my time, even though like I wasn't using Anki like I was supposed to, because everyone says like, oh, you should use Anki, but uh, it wasn't working for this. So drawing the pathways worked, and probably it worked for you when you took biochem. So you need to always be asking yourself, is what you're doing working? Why? Because your time is precious. You guys don't have enough time as is. Like, go, I don't know, go watch TV, go hang out with your friends. Don't like spam one over and over. Okay, back to making cards. So the problem with making cards is twofold. First, it's something that people do to feel like they're being productive, but it's not actually being productive. You can spend hours and hours making cards without even doing the cards, right? Because you have to make the cards, but then you have to do them as well. Uh, so the other thing is making cards is an example of passive learning. So you want to ask yourself, like, is this really a good use of my time when there are already pre-made decks available and made for me? Especially when these cards have been combed through so many times to make sure that they are good cards, because it is very easy to make bad cards, and it's good versus bad cards is a long discussion. But if you are going to make your own cards, I highly recommend you look up some videos on this. But suffice it to say, it's generally not worth your time to make your own cards. Sometimes it's useful to make cards if, for example, uh, you're done with content review and now you're going through practice questions and you find uh, common facts or themes that are not actually in the deck. Then I would make a card for that fact. The other thing I would caution you against is using classmates cards, because oftentimes, and I would dare to say most of the times, they're garbage. Like they're not good. You'll be wasting a lot of your time. Good Anki cards are singular factoids, like the tympanic membrane is the tympanic membrane. But oftentimes you'll see either essays or like too many like nitty gritty details that will obviously not be on the exam. Uh, and they're just not conducive to long term learning. They're made to be used like Quizlet cards, which again, as we've discussed, is not exactly what Anki is best used for. So think about it. Why am I making cards? Like, is it just to feel like I'm being productive without actually spending the time? Okay. A lot of people think to themselves, like, Anki is not for me. Like, they use it for a few days and then they don't go through it. But I would like to caution you against thinking this way, because, like, most people are actually the same. You are not actually unique. Uh, a lot of people, they do Anki for a few days and they think to themselves, I don't like this. This is boring. But, like, guess what? Like, studying sucks. Like, studying is boring. It's always going to be bad. The reality is, Anki is a good way of being lazy and studying. Like, you don't have to actively seek out what to study and review. Anki will calculate it and then show it to you. And then you just need to sit there and hit spacebar. This is really, really good. There's nothing quite like it. So I would really caution you against being fully dismissive of something that works for almost everyone. Obviously, like, there will be exceptions. Like, people, it's actually not for some people, which is fine. But I would really caution you against jumping to that conclusion without spending a lot of time, or at least a decent amount of time with the tool. If you talk to med students, most of them have like a love-hate relationship with this software. I know I do. Like, it works, but man, do I hate it sometimes. And remember, active learning is king. You really need to be actively learning, and this is a really great way to kind of force yourself to do it. So that's kind of all I had for common mistakes. I just wanted to throw in some bonuses, some settings, and extensions that I thought help make Anki more interesting and save you some time. So the first I wanted to show you was this Barry siblings toggle. You should turn all of these on. Uh, and just trust me on that for now. FSRS, this is a whole rabbit hole. You can look at it, look into it, uh, but it will reduce the amount of Anki you have to do every day. Some people like to get a controller. You can use the Kentanki extension. You can use your phone as a controller. This only works on private networks, not public networks. You can get an 8-bit DO controller, or you can do, there's an extension called HJKL reviews where you can use your right hand to hit easy, again, new, etc., or good, etc. And then there are some things that you can do to make Anki more interesting. So they have like a Pokemon thing, they have a leaderboard thing. Personally, I don't like either of these, but the thing I do is I mix in other subjects. So for me personally, I will pull up my Anki here, and I did not do anything yet today. Sorry. But what I do is I have language decks and I mix them up, like I mix them in under this everything umbrella. So when I go to study, I click everything and then I get Arabic, French, Urdu, and mixed in. So that's one thing I do to kind of keep things interesting as I study. Okay, so to wrap things up, really, you really want to be self-reflective. So I had like a little self-reflection blurb on every slide, and this is really important because, again, you don't want to waste your time. Don't keep doing the same thing over and over, expecting things to change. Uh, Recognize when things are not going right, and then be very quick on your feet. Because in med school, you really won't have the time or patience to deal with these problems. So, some advice for you is to keep your eyes on the prize. You should ask yourself, why am I doing this? Everyone has a why as to why they're pursuing medicine. Uh, a lot of people are there to chase the bag, which is fine. Like, you know, get the bag, but also like you should have other things as well. Because I do have classmates who are really like just gunning for like money, and they are super super miserable right now. Um, Really really spend time on the why, and that will make all of this studying easier. The other thing is, the other prize is MCAT score. So knowing the content is only half the battle. You need to learn the test as well. You don't just need to know the information. You need to know how the information is going to be tested. Uh, you need to be able to take such a long exam, right? It's an 8-hour exam. You're going to need to build up stamina for test taking, right? You don't build stamina for a marathon by reading about marathons. You build stamina by running. Finally, learning how to learn and spending this time now will pay dividends in med school. Because remember, you're going to be self-directed learning for the rest of your life. So inshallah, I hope this helps. If you have any questions, you can always hit me up. Yeah, assalamu alaikum.